Part 4, the day of the memorial service arrived too quickly. Cathara woke early from her rest cycle, her mind already processing what was to come. She had spent the previous evening researching human funeral customs more thoroughly. She learned about proper behavior, about what to say and what not to say, about how to show respect, but no amount of research could truly prepare her for the reality. Cathara arrived at the ceremonial hall 30 minutes before the service was scheduled to begin. She wanted to observe, to understand the space before it filled with mourners. The hall had been transformed from its usual stark functionality into something softer, more intimate. The bright overhead lights had been dimmed. In their place, dozens of small candles flickered on tables around the room. Real candles with real flames, which surprised Cathara. Open flames were usually prohibited on space stations. Someone must have made a special exception. At the front of the room stood two large holographic displays. They cycled through photographs. G1 smiling broadly, his eyes bright with laughter. Heejin wearing hiking gear, standing in front of mountains that must have been on Earth. Both of them together, arms around each other's shoulders, making silly faces at the camera. The images were full of life and joy and the kind of happiness that comes from being young and believing the future stretches forever ahead. Cathara stared at the images for a long time. These two people had been alive just days ago. They had walked these same halls. They had eaten in the same dining areas. They had laughed and studied and planned their futures. And now they were gone, scattered as atoms in the vast emptiness of space. For the first time, Cathara felt something close to what humans might call sadness. Not for herself, but for the loss of these two lives, for the futures they would never have. For the dreams that had died with them, people began arriving, mostly humans as Cathara had expected. They wore dark clothing, black, navy blue, deep gray. Cathara looked down at her own bioluminescent skin, glowing its usual pale blue. She had not known about the color custom. She felt suddenly conspicuous, like she did not belong. But then a human woman approached her. She was older, with gray streaks in her dark hair and kind eyes behind her glasses. "You must be Cathara," the woman said gently. "Minho told me about you. I am Dr. Yuna. I teach xenobiology. Jiwan was my student." "I am honored to meet you," Cathara replied, using a formal greeting she had learned, "though I wish the circumstances were different." "So do we all," Dr. Yuna said. Her eyes were already red and puffy. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to Minho to have you here." More people continued to arrive. Cathara was surprised by how many there were. She had thought that Jiwan and Hyejin were just students, young people who had not been at the academy very long. But the hall filled quickly with humans and non-humans alike. There were professors and staff members. There were other students from various species. There was even a small group of Mandarin engineers who had apparently worked with Hyejin on some kind of propulsion project. Each person who entered carried their own grief, their own connection to the two who had died. Minho arrived shortly before the service was scheduled to begin. He wore a formal black suit. His face was pale, his eyes still showing the signs of many tears. But he walked steadily, his posture straight. Dr. Yuna went to him immediately, pulling him into an embrace. They spoke quietly in Korean for a moment. Then Minho saw Cathara. He excused himself from Dr. Yuna and came over. Despite everything, he managed a small smile. "You came," he said. "I said I would," Cathara replied. "How are you?" Minho's smile faded. "I do not know. I feel like I am moving through water. Like nothing is quite real. That is a normal response to trauma," Cathara said. Then she hesitated. "But I think you do not need facts right now. You need support." Minho's expression softened. "You are learning." The service began with silence. Not the empty silence of an unused room, but a heavy, meaningful silence. Everyone in the hall stood quietly, heads bowed, united in their shared grief. Cathara had read about this practice. A moment of silence to honor the dead. It felt more powerful than she had expected. Then Dr. Yuna moved to the front of the room. She stood before the holographic displays, her hands clasped in front of her. When she spoke, her voice wavered but remained clear. "We are here to remember two bright souls," she began. "Jiwan and Hyejin were students, yes. But they were so much more than that. They were friends. They were dreamers. They were young people who believed that the universe could be a better place, and they wanted to be part of making it so." Dr. Yuna spoke about Jiwan first. She told stories about his endless curiosity, his habit of asking questions that made everyone think harder, his genuine interest in understanding how different species saw the world. She talked about how he would stay after class to discuss ideas, how he befriended everyone he met, how he made people feel seen and valued. Then she spoke about Hyejin, about her determination and her brilliant mind, about how she wanted to design ships that would carry people safely between the stars, about her sketches and calculations and wild ideas that just might have worked given time. Other people stood to speak. A Mandarin engineer named Crix talked about working with Hyejin on engine designs. A human student named Sunho shared memories of late-night study sessions and terrible cooking experiments with Jiwon. Each speaker added another piece to the picture of who these two young people had been. Thara listened carefully to every word. She was trying to understand not just what was being said, but why it mattered. These were stories. Just words about things that had happened. They did not change the fact that Jiwon and Hyejin were dead. They did not bring them back. They did not ease the pain of loss. But as Cathara watched the faces of the mourners, she began to understand. The stories were not meant to change anything. They were meant to preserve something, to keep Jiwon and Hyejin alive in the only way that was still possible now, through memory, through shared experience, through the connections they had made while they lived. Then Minho stood to speak. Cathara felt her pattern's pulse with concern. She could see his hands shaking. She could see the effort it took for him to walk to the front of the room. When Minho began to speak, his voice was barely above a whisper. Jiwon and Hyejin were my best friends. When I first arrived at the academy, I was alone and scared. They found me sitting in the gardens, and they just sat down next to me. They did not try to fix anything. They just sat with me, and that was when I knew I would be okay here. His voice cracked. Tears began to stream down his face. We promised we would do this together. We promised we would explore the galaxy and learn everything and prove that humans could build bridges between worlds. And now they are gone, and I do not know how to keep going without them. I do not know how to exist in a universe where they do not exist too. Dr. Yuna stood and embraced Minho as he broke down completely. Around the room, other people were crying too. The grief was contagious, spreading from person to person like a wave. Cathara felt something strange happening in her neural pathways. Something that should not have been possible for a Lyrian. She felt the pain in the room as if it were her own pain. She felt the loss as if she had lost someone dear to her. She understood finally and completely why humans needed these ceremonies. Because grief was not meant to be carried alone. Because love was too important to let disappear without acknowledgement. Because remembering together was the only way to make sure that the dead were not forgotten. The service continued with more speakers and a song in Korean that Dr. Yuna sang with tears in her voice. Finally, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, people began to file slowly out of the hall, but they did not leave quickly. They stayed in small groups, talking quietly, embracing, sharing more memories. Cathara saw Minho standing alone near the holographic displays. He was looking at a picture of the three friends together, all of them laughing at something outside the frame. Cathara made a decision. She walked over to him, her mind processing millions of calculations about cultural customs and appropriate behavior, but in the end she ignored all of that data. She did what felt right instead of what made logical sense. She reached out and wrapped her arms around Minho in a hug. Part 1. The classroom was full of strange beings from different worlds. Cathara sat in her seat, her blue skin glowing softly under the lights. She was a Lyraean, and her people believed in logic above all else. Everything had to make sense. Everything had to have a reason. Today, Professor Veltar was teaching about death. Not the science of death, but what different species did when someone died. Cathara found this topic confusing. Her people did not waste time on the dead. When a Lyraean died, their body was broken down and used to feed the living. Their memories were saved in computers. Life went on. It was simple. It was clean. It made sense, but humans were different. Cathara had been watching the human student in her class. His name was Minho. He came from a planet called Earth, far away in a system humans called Sol. He was quiet and kept to himself most of the time. But when he did speak, he said interesting things. The professor showed pictures on the wall, pictures of how different aliens dealt with death. Some burned their dead. Some put them in the ground. Some sent them into space. Each species had their own way. Then the professor showed pictures of human funerals. Cathara saw rooms full of people dressed in dark colors. She saw bodies in expensive boxes. She saw stone monuments with names carved into them. She saw people crying and holding each other. Cathara raised her hand. The professor made a sound that meant she could speak. She chose her words carefully. She did not want to be rude, but she really wanted to understand. "I have a question about humans," Cathara said. Her voice was soft and musical, even through the translation device. Humans spend a lot of money on funerals. They build big monuments. They have long ceremonies. They keep the bodies instead of using them for something useful. But the person is dead. They cannot see any of this. They cannot feel anything. So why do humans do it? What is the point? The room became quiet. Other students turned to look at Minho. Cathara had not meant to put him on the spot. She was just curious. But now everyone was waiting for him to answer. Professor Veltar made a sound of interest. The professor was made of crystal, and light moved through them in patterns. Those patterns showed that the professor was curious too. "Perhaps our human student can explain," the professor said. Minho put down his writing tool. He stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. Cathara had to listen carefully to hear him. "We do not honor death," Minho said. "We honor life. We honor the person who lived. And we help the people who are still alive to deal with their pain." Cathara's skin patterns changed color. This happened when she was confused. She did not understand his answer. "But pain is not useful," she said. "Grief makes people sad. It makes them work slower. It makes them sick sometimes. Why would you have ceremonies that make the pain worse? Why not just move on?" Something changed in Minho's face. It was a small change, but Cathara noticed it. His eyes looked sad. His mouth became tight. She realized that her question had hurt him somehow, but she did not understand how or why. Minho was quiet for a long moment. The whole class waited. Finally he spoke again. "Because some things matter more than being useful," he said. "Some things matter more than being fast or efficient. Some things just matter because they matter." Then he sat down. He picked up his writing tool again. He looked down at his work. The way he sat made it clear that he did not want to talk anymore. Professor Veltar moved on to another topic. But Cathara could not pay attention. She kept thinking about what Minho had said. And more than that, she kept thinking about how he had said it. There was something in his voice. Something that her people did not have a word for. Cathara looked across the room at Minho. He was writing notes again, his head down, his dark hair falling over his eyes. She wondered what had happened to him. She wondered why a simple question about death had made him look so sad. When class ended, Cathara gathered her things slowly. She wanted to talk to Minho. She wanted to say she was sorry if her question had been wrong. But when she looked up, his seat was empty. He had already left. Cathara walked back to her room alone. She could not stop thinking about the question. It bothered her, not because she did not have an answer, but because Minho's answer had not made sense. And things that did not make sense bothered Cathara very much. That night, Cathara could not sleep. Her people did not sleep like humans did. Instead, they entered a rest state where their minds processed the day's information. But tonight, Cathara's mind would not rest. It kept going back to the same question. Why do humans honor death? Minho had said they honor life, but that did not make sense to Cathara. Life and death were opposites. How could you honor one by focusing on the other? He had also said something about helping people deal with pain, but Cathara's people dealt with pain by removing it. They used logic to understand that death was natural. They used technology to preserve what could be preserved. They moved forward. They did not waste time being sad, but maybe that was the problem. Maybe humans could not remove their pain the way Lyrans could. Maybe their minds worked differently. Maybe they needed these ceremonies and monuments and gatherings for a reason that Cathara did not yet understand. Cathara decided she needed to learn more. She accessed the station's database and began reading about human funeral customs. She read for hours. She learned about different types of ceremonies from different human cultures. She learned about burial and cremation and memorial services. She learned about grief counseling and support groups and anniversary remembrances. The information was interesting, but it did not answer her real question. The database told her what humans did, but not why they did it. It gave her facts, but not understanding. Cathara realized that she needed to talk to a human directly. She needed to ask her questions to someone who could explain in a way that made sense, and there was only one human she knew well enough to ask. She would need to talk to Minho again. But this time she would be more careful. She would not ask her questions in front of the whole class. She would not push if he seemed uncomfortable. She would be respectful and patient. Cathara composed a message to Minho on her device. She wrote it, then deleted it. She wrote it again, then deleted it again. She did this many times. She wanted the words to be right. Finally, she wrote something simple and honest. She told Minho that she had not meant to upset him in class. She told him that she really wanted to understand. She asked if he would be willing to talk to her about human customs when he had time. She said she would understand if he said no. Cathara read the message one more time. Then, before she could change her mind again, she sent it. Now all she could do was wait, and hope that Minho would give her another chance to understand. Part 2. 3 days passed before Minho replied to Cathara's message. During those 3 days, Cathara checked her device constantly. She told herself she was just curious about human culture, but deep down she knew it was more than that. She genuinely wanted to understand Minho's answer, and maybe she wanted to understand Minho himself. When the reply finally came, it was short but kind. Minho said he was not upset with her. He understood her confusion. He suggested they meet in Garden Section 7 the next day at 2 in the afternoon. He said he would try to explain things better than he had in class. Cathara arrived at the garden exactly on time. Her people were very precise about time. Being late made no sense to them. Being early was inefficient. So Cathara always arrived exactly when she said she would. The garden was beautiful. It was one of the few places on the space station that felt alive. Real plants grew there, brought from different worlds. The air was warm and slightly humid. It smelled like earth and growing things. Minho was already there. He sat on a bench under a tree with long, drooping branches. Cathara recognized it as a willow tree from Earth. She had seen pictures of them in the database. Minho looked up as Cathara approached. He smiled slightly. It was a small smile, but it seemed genuine. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for agreeing to talk with me," Cathara replied. She sat down on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I truly did not mean to cause you discomfort in class." Minho shook his head. "You didn't, well, maybe a little. But not because you did anything wrong. Your question was fair. It was just hard to answer." He was quiet for a moment, looking at the willow branches moving in the artificial breeze. Then he turned to face Cathara more directly. "Your people, the Lyrians, you do not experience grief the way humans do. Is that right?" he asked. "That is correct," Cathara said. "When one of us dies, we acknowledge the loss. But we process it through logic. We understand that death is part of the natural cycle. We save what can be saved, their knowledge and contributions to our society. Then we continue forward. Staying sad would not bring them back, so we do not stay sad." Minho nodded slowly. "That makes sense for your species. But humans are different. When someone we love dies, we can't just upload their memories or share their knowledge with everyone else. When they die, everything they were, everything they thought and felt and knew, all of that dies with them. It's just gone." Cathara's skin patterns shifted, showing her surprise. "That must be terrifying. To know that everything you are could simply vanish." "It is," Minho agreed quietly. "And that is why funerals matter so much to us. When someone dies, the only thing we have left are our memories of them. And memory is fragile. It fades, it changes. So we gather together and we share our memories out loud. We tell stories about the person who died. We talk about what they meant to us. We remind each other that they existed, that they mattered." He paused, his expression becoming distant. Cathara could tell he was remembering something specific. She waited patiently for him to continue. "My grandmother died 2 years ago," Minho said finally. His voice was softer now, more careful. "She raised me. My parents were always traveling for their work. So I lived with her from the time I was very small until I was old enough to come here to the academy." Cathara listened without interrupting. She sensed that this was important. "She loved plants," Minho continued. "That is why I come here to the gardens. It reminds me of her. She taught me the names of hundreds of different plants. She showed me how to take care of them, how to be patient with them, how to watch and wait and let things grow in their own time." He touched one of the willow branches gently. "When she died, I felt like part of me died too. Like there was a hole inside me that would never be filled. At her funeral, dozens of people came, people I had never met, and they all told stories about her, about things she had done for them, ways she had helped them, moments that had mattered. Minho's eyes were shining now. Cathara realized he was holding back tears. She had read that humans cried when they were sad. She had never seen it in person before. Listening to those stories hurt, Minho said. It made me miss her even more. But it also helped, because it showed me that she had touched so many lives, that she had made a difference in the world, that even though she was gone, the effects of her life continued. The people she helped would remember her, and maybe they would help others the same way she helped them. Cathara was processing all of this information. Her mind was working to understand. So funerals are not really about the dead person. They are about the living people who are left behind. Yes and no, Minho said. They are about both. We honor the person who died by remembering them, by celebrating their life, by acknowledging that they mattered. But we also gather together to support each other, to remind each other that we are not alone in our grief, that other people understand the pain of loss. He looked at Cathara directly. Your people don't need that because you can share memories directly. You have your collective archives, but humans only have each other. So we have to create rituals and ceremonies to do what your technology does automatically. We have to work harder to keep memories alive, to maintain connections, to prove that individual lives matter. Cathara felt something unusual happening in her neural pathways. It was not quite emotion the way humans experienced it, but it was something close, a kind of understanding that went beyond pure logic. I think I am beginning to understand, she said slowly. Humans are alone inside their own minds in a way that my people are not. So you need these external rituals to create connection, to prove to each other that you are not alone, that your lives have meaning. Minho smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. Exactly. You understand it better than most species do. They sat together in silence for a while. It was a comfortable silence. Cathara found herself appreciating the garden more than she had before. The plants growing patiently, the artificial sunlight filtering through the leaves, the sense of life continuing its cycles. Would you like to meet again? Minho asked eventually. To talk more about human culture? Or Lorraine culture? I would like to learn more about your people too. I would like that very much, Cathara said, and she meant it. As they walked back toward the main station together, Cathara thought about what she had learned. She had come looking for logical answers to logical questions, but what she had found was something deeper, something about what it meant to be human, and what it might mean to be friends with a human. She still did not fully understand grief. How could she? Her species did not experience it the way humans did. But she understood something important now. She understood why it mattered to humans, why they needed their rituals and ceremonies, why they honored death even though, in her words, it accomplished nothing practical. It accomplished something that was not practical at all. It accomplished something that was purely, deeply emotional. It helped humans remember that they mattered to each other, that love was real even after death. That connection could survive loss. And somehow Cathara thought that might be the most important thing of all. Part 3. Over the next few weeks, Cathara and Minho met regularly in the gardens. They talked about many things. Sometimes they discussed their classes. Sometimes they shared stories about their home worlds. Cathara told Minho about the crystal, cities of her planet where buildings grew like living things and information flowed through the air like water. Minho told Cathara about Earth, about oceans and mountains, about the feeling of real wind and real rain. Cathara found herself looking forward to these meetings. She had never had a friend from another species before. Most Lyraeans preferred to stay with their own kind. But Minho was different from anyone Cathara had ever known. He thought about things deeply. He felt things intensely. He made Cathara question ideas she had always accepted without thinking. There were 2 other humans at the academy that cycle. Their names were Jiwon and Hyejin. Cathara saw them sometimes in the dining hall with Minho. The 3 of them would sit together and talk in Korean, their native language. They seemed very close. They laughed together often. They had the kind of easy friendship that came from shared experience and understanding. Cathara had never felt envious before. Envy was an illogical emotion. But watching the 3 humans together, she felt something close to it. She wanted to understand them the way they understood each other. She wanted to be part of their circle, not just an outsider looking in. One afternoon, Cathara was in her advanced studies class when her device suddenly lit up. It was an emergency alert, the kind that only went out when something serious had happened. Around the classroom, several other devices began buzzing and beeping at the same time. Cathara looked at her screen. The message was short and terrible. Transport vessel Harmony's light had suffered a catastrophic system failure. The ship had broken apart in space. Everyone on board was dead. Cathara felt her neural processes stutter. She knew that ship. She had traveled on it herself just a few weeks ago. It was one of the regular supply ships that moved between the Academy and the nearest trade station. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be reliable. A list of casualties appeared on her screen. Cathara scanned through the names, her optical sensors moving faster than human eyes could follow. Most of the names were unfamiliar. Crew members she had never met. Passengers she did not know. Then she saw two names that made her patterns flicker with shock. Jiwan, human. Student Hyejin, human. Student. Cathara stood up abruptly. Her professor looked at her with concern, but Cathara barely noticed. She gathered her materials quickly and left the classroom without explanation. She had to find Minho. She had to find him now. She checked the library first. Not there. She checked the dining hall. Empty. She checked his dormitory, but no one answered when she knocked. Finally, almost without thinking, she headed toward Garden Section 7, their place, the place where they always met. He was there, sitting under the willow tree. His head was down. His device lay dark and forgotten beside him on the bench. He looked small somehow, smaller than usual, like something inside him had collapsed. Cathara approached slowly. She did not know what to say. Her people had no traditions for this moment, no protocols for comforting someone in grief. All her knowledge of human customs suddenly seemed like useless data, facts without meaning. Minho, she said softly when she reached him. He looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. His face was wet with tears. Cathara had read about human crying, but seeing it was different. Seeing Minho's pain was different. It made something hurt, inside her own chest, even though Lyrans did not feel pain that way. I heard about the transport, Cathara said. I saw the names, Jiwan and Hyejin. I am. She paused. What were the right words? I am sorry for your loss. Minho made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You remembered the phrase, the one I taught you. Yes, Cathara said. She sat down beside him, closer than she usually sat. What will happen now? Minho wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. There will be a memorial service, the day after tomorrow. The station commander approved it. Even though there are no bodies to bury, even though they are just gone, lost in space somewhere. His voice broke on the last word. Cathara watched as fresh tears rolled down his face. She had never felt so helpless. All her intelligence, all her knowledge, and she had no idea how to ease his pain. They were my best friends, Minho said quietly. Jiwan and I grew up in the same city. We went to the same schools. We applied to the academy together. Hyejin joined our group in university. The three of us, we promised we would explore the galaxy together. We promised we would always look out for each other. He looked at Cathara with eyes full of anguish. How do I keep going without them? How do I do this alone? Cathara did not have an answer. Her people would say that he should focus on his studies, that he should process his grief through logic, that he should move forward because standing still accomplished nothing. But Cathara had learned enough about humans to know that those answers would be wrong. They would be worse than useless. They would be cruel. So instead she said the only thing that felt true. You are not alone. I am here. Minho looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Thank you, he whispered. They sat together in silence as the artificial day moved toward artificial evening. The willow branches swayed in the gentle breeze. Other students passed by occasionally, but no one disturbed them. Word of the accident must have spread quickly through the station. Finally, after what might have been hours, Minho spoke again. "The memorial service," he said. "You asked before about wanting to experience a human funeral, to understand it. If you still want to come, I would like you to be there." Cathara felt her patterns pulse with surprise. "You want me there?" "Yes," Minho said. "I do not want to face it alone, and you are my friend. That means something. Friend." The word settled into Cathara's consciousness like a weight and a gift at the same time. She had been thinking of Minho as a friend for weeks now, but hearing him say it made it real in a way it had not been before. "I will be there," Cathara said firmly. "I promise." Minho nodded. He seemed steadier now, though the pain was still clear in every line of his body. "Thank you. Really. Thank you." Cathara stayed with Minho until the artificial stars began to appear in the garden's projected sky. She did not try to make him feel better. She did not offer logical solutions or efficient ways to process his grief. She just stayed, just sat beside him, just let him know he was not alone. Because that, Cathara was learning, was what friendship meant. Not fixing problems, not making pain disappear, but being present, being there, proving through presence that someone cared. And in 2 days, Cathara would attend her first human funeral. She would witness grief up close. She would finally understand, in a way that went beyond data and facts, why humans honored their dead. She did not know yet how much that experience would change her. But she was about to find out. Part 5. For a moment, Minho froze in surprise. Cathara's embrace was awkward. She had never hugged anyone before. Her arms were stiff and uncertain. Her body temperature was cooler than human baseline, and her skin had a smooth, slightly luminescent quality that felt strange against human flesh. But then Minho's arms came up around her. He buried his face against her shoulder and began to sob, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. Cathara stood very still, holding him, letting him cry. She did not try to stop his tears or offer empty comfort. She just held him and let him grieve. Around them, the few people still in the hall watched with understanding. This was not strange to them. This was what loss looked like. This was how humans supported each other through pain. Dr. Yuna approached quietly and stood near them. She did not interrupt, but her presence was there, solid and comforting. Other people came close too, forming a loose circle around Minho and Cathara. Not crowding, but present, showing through their physical nearness that Minho was not alone in his grief. Cathara felt something shift in her understanding. This was what human funerals were really about. Not the speeches or the candles or the photographs. Those were just tools. The real point was this: people gathering together, people holding each other, people proving through their presence that connection survived loss, that love outlasted death. After a while, Minho's sobs quieted to hiccups, then to shaky breaths. He pulled back slightly, wiping at his face with one hand while keeping the other on Cathara's arm. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was hoarse from crying. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for the hug." Cathara's patterns shifted to a warm amber color. "I understand now," she said quietly. "This is not about logic or efficiency. This is about proving that what you shared with them mattered. That they mattered. That love is real even when the person is gone." Minho nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "Yes, exactly that." Dr. Yuna stepped forward and touched Minho's shoulder gently. "Jiwan and Hyejin would have liked your friend," she said, glancing at Cathara with approval. They always appreciated people who asked difficult questions and actually listened to the answers. Minho managed a sad smile. They would have. Jiwan especially. He loved challenging people's assumptions. The three of them stood together, talking quietly. Other people joined the conversation, sharing more memories of Jiwan and Hyejin. Stories that made people laugh through their tears. Moments that seemed small but had mattered to those who remembered them. Cathara listened to all of it. She was learning something important. These stories were not just about remembering the dead. They were about the living too. About how the people who died had shaped the people who survived. About how relationships changed you, left marks on you, made you different than you would have been otherwise. Jiwan and Hyejin were gone. But their effects on the world remained, in the people they had taught. in the friends they had made, in the ideas they had shared. Death had taken their bodies and their minds, but it could not erase their impact. That remained as long as people remembered, as long as people spoke their names and told their stories. Eventually, the hall emptied. The candles were extinguished. The holographic displays were turned off, but the connections formed that day, the memories shared, those would continue. That was the real point of the ceremony. Cathara walked with Minho back through the station's corridors. They moved slowly, neither in a hurry to be anywhere else. The silence between them was comfortable now. They did not need to fill it with words. When they reached the gardens, they sat together under the willow tree. The artificial stars were beginning to appear in the projected sky above. It was peaceful there, quiet in a way that felt restorative rather than empty. "How do you feel?" Cathara asked after a while. Minho thought about the question. "Terrible," he said honestly. "But also, I do not know. Less alone than I expected. The service helped. Having people there who knew them, who loved them. Hearing the stories. It made them feel real again, even though they are gone." He looked at Cathara. "And having you there helped too. Knowing that someone who never even met Jiwon and Hyejin cared enough to come. That mattered more than you probably realize." Cathara's patterns shifted through several colors as she processed complex emotions. "I came because you are my friend," she said simply. "And I wanted to support you. But I also came because I wanted to understand. And now I think I do." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My people believe that logic is the highest value. That efficiency is what matters most. We do not waste time on grief because grief does not change anything. But we are wrong about that. We are missing something important." Minho waited for her to continue. "Grief does change things," Cathara said slowly. "It reminds us that we loved someone, that they mattered to us, that losing them hurts because having them was valuable. And the ceremonies, the funerals, they are not about the dead at all. They are about the living, about proving to each other that we are not alone. That connection is real and worth honoring." She looked at Minho directly. "When I hugged you today, it was inefficient. It did not solve anything. It did not bring your friends back. But it mattered anyway. Because you matter to me. Because friendship is not about efficiency. It is about choosing to care even when caring hurts." Minho's eyes filled with tears again, but he was smiling too. "You understand?" he said softly. "Really understand. Not just the facts, but the feeling behind it all." "I think I am beginning to," Cathara agreed. "Though I imagine understanding grief is something that grows over time. Something you learn by living through it with others." "That is very wise," Minho said. "My grandmother used to say that the most important lessons cannot be taught. They can only be experienced." They sat quietly for a while longer. Cathara thought about everything she had learned. About grief and love. About connection and loss. About how humans dealt with the reality of death by honoring life. About how inefficient it all was and how necessary. Her people would not understand. They would say she was becoming too influenced by human emotions. Too illogical. Too inefficient. But Cathara did not care. She had learned something her people had forgotten or perhaps never known. She had learned that some things mattered more than logic. That connection and love and grief were not weaknesses to be overcome, but fundamental parts of what made life meaningful. "Will you be okay?" Cathara asked eventually. Minho considered the question. "Not right away," he admitted. "I will carry this grief for a long time. Maybe forever, but that is okay. That is part of honoring them. Letting them matter enough that their absence changes me." He looked at Cathara with gratitude. "But I will not carry it alone. I have friends. I have you. And that makes all the difference." Cathara felt her patterns brighten with warmth. "Yes, you have me. And I promise to be here. Whenever you need someone to sit with you, to hold you, to remind you that you are not alone." "Thank you," Minho said simply, "for everything." They remained in the garden as the artificial night deepened. Around them, the station continued its eternal cycle. Students learning, teachers teaching, life going on despite death. But in that moment, in that garden, Cathara and Minho were building something important, a friendship that bridged two worlds, a connection that proved love could survive loss. Cathara had asked why humans honored death. Now she knew. They honored death because they honored life, because they believed that every individual mattered, because they understood that love required witness and grief was love's echo, and both deserved recognition. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was deeply, profoundly human, and Cathara, a Lyran who had spent her whole life valuing logic above all else, had learned that sometimes the most important things in the universe were the ones that made no logical sense at all. Sometimes the most important things were simply about choosing to care, about being present, about proving through action that connection mattered more than efficiency, that love mattered more than logic, that people mattered even after they were gone, especially after they were gone. The end